Hi everyone, welcome back to Misinformation in Science and Society. Here to listen, not to judge. I'm your host Annie, and today with us we have Philipp Lorenz, who is a researcher interested in digital media. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Annie.
Yeah.
I'm good. Sorry for the delay. I had troubles finding the link.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, here I am. So
Uh-huh.
nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. Um, so could you please introduce yourself a little bit? What do you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a researcher at the Max-Planck-Institute for Human Development in Berlin. I'm a physicist by training, and I did my PhD in complex social systems, and now I am more interested in one of the most complex social systems that we have built, which is social media, or more generally digital media that connects us all and where we communicate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so why did you choose this career initially?
Mm, Generally, the scientific career I cannot really tell because I don't know, one thing followed the other. I did my master's and I had fun, and I found a nice PhD topic, and yeah, so probably I was just following a path. Um, this specific topic is fascinating me on a scientific level because um, it's a really real world application of the theory of complex systems, so that I learned in my studies about in physics about complex systems,
Mm-hmm.
and that I found always fascinating. And then social media, or generally the connected communication is a very big and important real world example of this kind of theory. And so I enjoyed applying. And on the other hand, so that's my, so to say, scientific, and then also my more societal interest in this topic is that I just believe it's very important that we build these systems correctly in order to have a functioning society and public discourse.
Yeah. So, why do you think truth is so important, and why do you think misinformation is such a big issue right now?
Mm, I think truth is important. Even though I would like to push back a bit on this idea that mis or disinformation is the main cause of all our problems. There
Mhm.
are, of course, deeper societal problems um, that it's important to think about those. And I see more like the rapid distribution of mis and disinformation as a symptom rather than a cause, so to say. So I would say that this is a symptom of a system that we have built where we can easily share information. It follows commercial rules. Certain things are rewarded and certain things not so much. And this is a system that produces certain kind of discourse and content.
Mhm.
Um, and not, yeah, and at least in my research, I try to fix the problem and understand the problem, not necessarily from that perspective, but rather what are the systemic reasons for those things to become so prevalent. Um, and I would say yes, but of course I believe the truth is important. And when you think about what should be the ideal mm, public discourse, then I believe that there are things that are more true than others. And that those should somehow be rewarded in a way, but I don't believe that it's so simple, and we cannot just correct our way towards truth and delete all the bad information, or in whatever way we do it, and then we have no problem anymore. And there are also always grades of truth, and there's always let's say political bias,
Mhm.
one-sided reporting, things like that, that wouldn't necessarily, that there are in principle true information, but still shape our opinions and our beliefs. So I would say that needs to be looked at more differentiated.
Yeah, for sure. So could you talk a little more about like the systemic problems that might have like led to misinformation and so that.
So one systemic thing that we looked at is a development that seems to be reaching back not even in before internet, but even before that. Like we looked at data from almost one last century, and we saw a so-called acceleration, social acceleration of the discourse. So what we could quantify is that on social media, but also on, for example, written books or in movies, that topics don't last as long in the public attention as they used to do, so that there is like a quicker turnaround between topics on Twitter with the years, or there's a quicker turnaround between different movies or topics in books. So that's a more of a long-term development, and has been described in sociology, that how technology is speeding up our lives. We become more efficient, of course. That's the goal of technology often, and that makes things quicker. So, and that's the same thing for social media. So we can very easily share a lot of information with many people with a few clicks. We can consume a lot of information very quickly. We can scroll through hundreds of articles wherever we are. And that, of course, speeds up our news cycles, for example. So we are following the news not once a day with a printed newspaper, but we can do it in the morning once, and then on the train and at work and so on. But it seems to lead to the fact that we switch topics quicker, and the quicker we switch topics, the more difficult it becomes for journalists, for example, to pick up speed and to deliver quality content, so to say. And I think this is a nice example, but I mean, this connection is not yet absolutely made empirically clear. But my suspicion is that the quicker our discourse becomes, the more superficial it becomes, and then, of course, also the less true. So, you know, then quick stories that might be half thought up have maybe an advantage in this kind of system, because the newer a story is, the more attractive it is. People click on it, and we have this kind of system that rewards clicks and quantity before quality. So those are, I think, or this is one example where there's a certain systemic change, and the outcome is that misinformation has an advantage, not that misinformation is the cause of the problem. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, what do you think like the worst type of misinformation is? Like about what?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, now in Corona times, we saw that there's health misinformation is, of course, potentially harming health directly. If people refuse to get vaccinated, it gets even worse, because it's not personal health only, but even public health. It's difficult to get to herd immunity, for example, and things like that. But it harms individual people as well. So that's really, of course, a very direct harm that's being produced. But for me personally, my most worrisome misinformation is the one that also leads to polarization, that so to say makes certain groups angry about other groups, and misinformed about them, and splits our societies. I think this is one of the things that, of course, makes me on the long term even more worried than health misinformation, because it feels like those creates gaps between groups of people that are maybe unfixable. And then how can you become a functioning society when people believe wrong things about and often bad things about the other side, and then democracy fails. So that's, I think, one of the worst.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So what do you think would be like the best like way to eliminate misinformation? I guess it would be like to solve the systemic problems, but like what do you think is the best way to like eliminate or like avoid or reduce that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this would probably be my most general, but also a bit lazy answer, is to say we have to solve the systemic problems. Of course, we can talk about if it's the best idea that the big platforms where our public discourse takes place are platforms that are commercial, that are driven by certain financial interests, or if it shouldn't be something that's democratic, legitimized, so that or the society decides how they should work and what they should reward, how the sorting of the feed should work and stuff like that. This is all determined by a few companies, and it's actually rolled out across the globe. So that's I think a very weird situation that we let such an important infrastructure be controlled by a few companies for so long. And I think this needs to change fundamentally. But of course, this is a very abstract thing, and it's a long process. We will have to do a lot of politics to regulate those platforms, and so and much more specific. So this is very high level, and much more specific answer would be we have to change how these platforms look and how they function. So on one hand, of course, we can look at the algorithm. What does the algorithm reward? So if I was talking about quantity before quality, so the idea could be if there should be anything in there that quantifies journalistic quality in a way. Obviously, that's very difficult, and you will hit a lot of barriers in this discussion. But even I think much more useful is the idea of that, to give people back more control over their news feed, over what they read and what they share, instead of trying to, as it happens now a bit, try to get to exploit their weaknesses and try to get as many shares as possible, as much screen time as possible, but rather let them decide how they want their feed to look like, what kind of content should be there. Also give them more information about where content comes from, who shared it before. Like, there's this kind of discussion about food labeling, where we have the right to know where certain products come from, what the ingredients are, and so on. Partly one could translate that also in the online world to empower users to understand better what they are consuming and what they are sharing, and also with whom they are sharing it. So if I click share, of course I know my followers sorry, will see it, but also how it might spread, who's the potential audience. Things like that are often still very hidden in the current architecture, and I think those would be important steps to improve informed decisions by users online. And I think currently this is almost the opposite. Platforms try to make everything as easy and as intransparent as possible. It's a very, sleek platform. There are very little things that you actually understand, and you can just consume. And I think that should somehow fundamentally change. And then we'll try in our research to test how people react if you give them extra information, how they deal with it, and how it changes their behavior. And I think this is important to do. But of course, we have to pick up speed a lot, because the big platforms, they have user behavior research, right? They have a lot of data scientists working on all the data that their platforms so they know quite well what we are doing online. And our research doesn't know so much yet. And I think we have to really build up this expertise so that we can build either new platforms or force the existing platforms to work more for us, the people, so to say, and less for their interest.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really good point. And giving more like information, I feel like it's pretty crucial. And yeah. So I think that's all my questions about misinformation. Uh, just for fun, do you have like a role model?
You mean a role model in research?
Anywhere, anything.
Good question. Um, I mean, there are, of course, brilliant researchers. The one I'm citing often is Herbert Simon. Probably
Mhm.
he's one of the uh, people who were ahead of their time back then. He already in the 70s predicted the attention economy that we live in now, in a very lively way.
Oh,
And he already talked about these things, and many more very important concepts he introduced that still are very important now. And especially in this type of research I'm doing, where everything is very dynamic, and social media is a moving target. Things change a lot. I think it's important that we find concepts, and goals, and methods that are more long lasting than what Twitter or Facebook is just currently doing.
mhm.
And I would like to achieve that in my research too. So if you
Yeah,
ask for a role model, maybe.
yeah, for sure. Um, so just to close this out, do you have any like advice for people, especially like teens? It can be about like information or not.
Um, yeah, I mean, specifically for young people, I think sometimes the idea exists that young people, digital natives, so to say, that they have a kind of a natural understanding of how the online world works.
Mm,
But I'm not so sure if that is true for evaluating information, understanding where it comes from,
mm,
and understanding the context of information and so on. So I think that's definitely a good idea to double check. But I don't have this message so much for teens because I think it's the job for schools and other educators to also teach digital media literacy in schools and so on. There's one nice group in Stanford, around Sam Weinberg, that developed courses for how to spot misinformation, how to do lateral reading, which means how to do online search to verify what you're reading. Um, and those are things that I think should move into schools and should reach young people, so that we have a new generation of more digital media literate
mhm. Yeah.
users. But yeah, this is a whole societal job that we all have to work on together.
Mhm.
And I hope we understand that, and that the young generation doesn't have to live with the broken system that we produced earlier. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So that'll be all. Thank you so much for this. It was great
Sure.
meeting you.
Yeah, and good luck with your channel. And it's, I think, a very nice idea, a good topic, and it's a really cool effort that you are so interested in those topics.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye bye.